Are you talking to the CEOs of various oil companies, encouraging them to use the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, I think they should. I think they should. I think they should use it. In my opinion, look, we took out just about all of their mine ships in one night. We're up to boat number 60. I didn't realize they had that big a Navy. I would say it was big and ineffective. But every one of their ships, just about all of their Navy is gone. Bottom of the sea.
Okay, so we have to update you on the latest stupid games being played by the Iranian regime, because after the Strait of Hormuz was recently reopened due to the fact that Iran's navy and conventional military was largely wiped out and was not all that strategically effective to begin with, it looks like Iran is now trying to deploy new, dirtier, unconventional, you could even say guerrilla tactics to mess with oil shipping through the Persian Gulf. Yesterday, it was alleged that they were trying to lay down naval mines, to which President Trump responded by blowing up those very mine boats. And then now, apparently, Iran is trying to deploy suicide boats to blow up these oil tankers, to which I think you know how that's going to end as well. Obviously, this is causing a fair degree of panic, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, we've seen many different flare-ups here where the Iranians try to do something in their new master plan, and then they get blown up for said master plan. And I have to say, I think in this case, you're watching a severe strategic blunder by the Iranian government. It's actually a massive mistake what they're doing. Let me explain why. Because first and foremost, if you're interested right now in self-preservation, then it's in your own self-interest to ultimately de-escalate. You can clearly tell that the Trump administration is trying to wrap up this war as quickly as possible. They're looking for a reason to declare victory. And instead of maybe standing back and just staying kind of quiet and maybe even playing dead, quote unquote, to an extent, no, instead they're trying to say, oh, we're going to keep on antagonizing you to the very end, which is only a greater incentive to keep getting attacked. I don't understand the strategic purpose of that. Now, you could also say that, oh, well, that's Iran showing that they're strong or something. But I would also point out that when you even consider it's not just the United States here who you're potentially antagonizing, you have to also consider the Persian Gulf countries. Let's bear in mind, it was already widely regarded as a severe strategic mistake when they brought countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar into this war. The Iranian president even tried to apologize and announced that they would stop doing that because they were like, oh shoot, we just pissed people off. Okay, so even if tensions with those Gulf states are now dying down a little bit, you're going to respond now by messing with their livelihood? Let me just put it this way. You think countries like Saudi Arabia are happy that Iran is still messing with the flow of the oil that's making all their money? I don't think so. And then lastly, we even have to consider Iran's top strategic friend in this whole crusade, who is, of course, China. Let's not forget that China, from Iran, but still gets a lot of their oil through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz as well. If this starts to escalate into some type of mutually assured destruction scenario, a lot of games being played with the oil tankers, you think Xi Jinping's going to be happy about that? You don't think he's going to likewise say, what are you doing? You're now messing with us as well. Let's not forget, China, as I think we've all established, is ultimately very self-interested on the world stage. They don't want their own interests and their own money and their own natural resources to get messed with. And I think Iran right now, by trying to keep on antagonizing, pushing those buttons, may be doing that as well. So we'll explain all of that. But again, I understand, right, the concern this is causing. I'm concerned about it as well. But at the end of the day, this is not all that smart, and we'll break down that whole story here today for you guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support. Also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, so here is what President Trump put out yesterday in response to intelligence reports that the Iranians were placing naval mines throughout the Hormuz Strait. Quote, if Iran has put out any mines in the Hormuz Strait and we have no reports of them doing so, we want them removed immediately. If for any reason mines were placed and they are not removed forthwith, the military consequences to Iran will be at a level never seen before. If, on the other hand, they removed what may have been placed, it will be a giant step in the right direction. So notice there, Trump is basically offering the off-ramp to the Iranians. Hey, you want to start to have some talks here? You want to figure out a way to get out of this whole thing? You're being given an opportunity. correct the mistake. I think you know from the context of this video what Iran responded by doing instead. Additionally, we are using the same technology and military and missile capacities deployed against drug traffickers to permanently eliminate any boat or ship attempting to mine the Hormuz Strait. They will be dealt with quickly and violently. Beware, President Donald J. Trump. And the U.S. government has followed up by announcing yesterday at least 10 different mine boats. Now, keep in mind, we're not talking about traditional naval ships anymore. Those have largely been destroyed. But, the boats that potentially they were using to throw down mines were destroyed. Trump is now saying that number is up to over 30. So, as you can tell, right, every time these fools, these idiots try to do something, what happens? They end up getting blown up, as you would expect. But they're going to keep on trying, I guess.
And my administration, as you know better than anybody, is also working to keep the oil flowing. It's flowing all over. We knocked out, they want to drop some mines. Very friendly people, mines, so boats blow up. And we knocked out as of, every hour I have to change because they knock them out so fast. I've never seen anything. Think of it. They knocked out 54 ships in 2 days, and they're real ships. In fact, I got angry at my people. I said, are they any good? Yeah, they're warships. I said, why the hell did we kill them? Why didn't we just capture them and use them in our Navy? They said they wouldn't have qualified for that. But I got a little upset with my people. I said, why do we have to knock them? And actually, one of my generals said, sir, it's a lot more fun doing it this way. But we knocked out 58 naval ships. We knocked out their Navy, okay? Let's put it that way. But they also knocked out the mine layers. They call them mine layers. They put mines in the water. Lovely job. Isn't that nice? Blow up ships. And we knocked out 31 of them.
And by the way, it seems clear that Iran really did plan to lay down these mines because following the strikes yesterday on supposedly inactive mining boats, Iran responded in retaliation by once again trying to fire their leftover stock of missiles and drones at random Middle Eastern states. This has been the strategy all along. Oh, the U.S. military did something to us. Okay, let's try to bomb a bunch of random civilians in Saudi Arabia again. And that is, of course, what they did in Dubai overnight, trying to shoot off this barrage. In the end, it was once again not all that militarily effective from what we know thus far. Their counterattack resulted in no deaths and only the injury of 4 foreign nationals, aka likely some random tourists that they managed to injure here. I'm not sure what the military purpose or effectiveness of that is, but of course, I'm sure that the crowd who's constantly screaming about the killing of civilians is going to care a lot about these random Muslim residents of the Middle East who have been targeted by this war. I'm sure they have a lot to say, by the way, of oil tankers, which are not military targets. They're civilian economic boats being blown up by Iran. Yeah, surely, they'll care a whole lot about that. Clearly, of course, that is not the case. But again, it does seem here Iran was trying to do this. We thwarted attempt number 1. So now, allegedly, they seem to be moving on here, folks, to attempt number 2, because overnight, likewise, we did see at least one report of a Thai oil tanker being blown up by something in the Persian Gulf. And then in response here, just tonight, we're also watching 2 fuel tankers apparently belonging to companies out of Iraq. So these are Iraqi oil tankers that were just likewise set on fire in the Persian Gulf. And the current reporting is that they were hit by Iranian boats, aka suicide boats that are fueled with explosives. So now that, again, Iran doesn't have much of a conventional navy left, their plan to lay down the mines was largely ineffective, according to the Wall Street Journal. They only managed to get 10 of them in the water before the United States basically blew up that capacity. Now they're just getting on speedboats and basically trying to use them. Oh, let's bring some bombs on the speedboats and then, basically try to do a typical Islamic suicide attack. According to Iraqi officials right now, they're indeed confirming Iranian explosive-laden boats behind attack on Iraqi oil tankers there in that region. And so certainly, look, on one hand, you're watching something that obviously is going to create a scare in the Persian Gulf, right? The Strait of Hormuz, it seemed open. Looks like not right now. Iran's trying to do something new. I would likewise, though, point out that we've seen historically how this has gone. And so whenever they try to do something stupid, it just means the U.S. has to respond to another thing. And so I would certainly say, I think the strategically smart thing right now to do, if you're the Trump administration, number one, the U.S. Navy needs to fully commit to we're going to patrol the Persian Gulf. I think the oil tankers, the companies, by the way, would like that. And of course, we're going to, protect that. But then again, I'll say at the same time, I don't think it's really smart right now what Iran's trying to do because, okay, so you're going to launch some speedboats. You really think the U.S. military can't hit those as well? You think that our drones, our jets, our whatever can't also take out a speedboat? But then likewise, let me delve deeper into the strategic thinking here, because I understand on the surface why you might think it makes sense for Iran to mess with the oil flow, because that's, again, if they can't beat us militarily, then this is the dirty tactic, is just kind of try to mess with the global economy and sabotage that in the process of you basically fighting for your life. But here's the core issue, okay, is again, as I stated in the beginning. So America, you're trying to look for a reason to de-escalate. Obviously, America's kind of trying already to declare it as a victory. You're going to re-escalate. You're going to antagonize. Doesn't seem all that smart. But at the same time, let's talk about China and let's talk about Iran's own oil tankers, folks, because I'm not sure if they realize or not. They haven't been all that smart throughout this conflict and even the negotiations before it. But this is an issue of mutually assured destruction. And by the way, let's also not forget, China is watching, which Trump recently spoke about when it pertained to that very Strait of Hormuz. Take a listen.
About the Strait, you mean? Yeah, well, I want to keep it open. I want to keep it good. It doesn't pertain to us so much as it does to China. We're really helping China here and other countries because they get a lot of their energy from the Straits. But hey, look, we have a good relationship with China. It's my honor to do it. Yeah.
See, here's the thing, is that contrary to popular belief, America actually does not get a lot of its oil from the Persian Gulf or the Middle East. It certainly affects our gas prices because of global supply and demand factors. Sure, that's true. But from a national security perspective, you're only talking about 4 to 5% of the oil and gasoline that we're using here in this country. But you know who does get a significant amount of their oil from the Persian Gulf? China, specifically from Iran. By the way, you know who else gets a lot of oil and gas from the Persian Gulf? The European Union, are kind of skittish NATO allies right now that are not sure whether they support America militarily or not. Who are you really affecting right now? Who are you really antagonizing Iran? The countries who maybe are not fully behind America so much yet. Gulf states too, by the way, who likewise, you think any of them, Iran, are going to tolerate their own economies, their own oil supplies being messed with? See, here's the thing. I think Iran, once again, just like when they started launching missiles at Saudi Arabia, thought that by involving and basically taking down other countries, they'll force those other countries to say, hey, America, you should be diplomatic. But instead, you're doing the opposite. You're only making them more mad. So I think the same is true of the Gulf states. Things were cooling off a little bit. Iran said they'd stop attacking. Now you're taking their oil. Now you're launching missiles at them again. You're screwing with Europe's economy, something for the Europeans to consider. And as it pertains to China, let's address that as well. Because right now, the current consensus, some are reporting that, well, the Iranians have been quietly trying to sneak their own oil tankers out to China this entire time. So basically trying to, help their top ally while trying to close down the oil for everyone else. Okay. But you understand if you're Iran, right? America can do that too. Okay. If you're going to mess with our oil tankers or just the world's oil tankers, we can also mess with yours, which thus far, it's not clear that America's done that a whole lot. But if they're going to be sneaking off oil tankers to China, okay, and you saw, by the way, America was just willing to seize Venezuelan oil tankers that were headed to countries like China and Russia. What's stopping America from doing that as well? I don't really understand. As I said, right, I think Iran right now, you're kind of just watching them cause even more problems for themselves. And sure, you might think that, well, if China does that, if America does that to China and their oil, then China's going to step in militarily and help us out. Okay, that's also what you believed on day one of Operation Epic Fury, and you sort of saw it didn't work. It didn't work. Why? Because China knows militarily they can't still compete with the U.S. to this day, and so they have no real motive or reason to do it. The loss of Iran certainly is devastating to potential military goals when it comes to a future invasion of Taiwan. But economically, they can get their oil from other places, right? Like, they don't necessarily need Iran. It's just really nice for them to have Iran, okay? So all of that kind of combines to the equation. China already, folks, has made the calculation. It is in their ultimate self-interest to not get too involved with Iran, not to mention Trump and Xi are having a summit right now at the end of the month. And by the way, China still has to sell a lot of their products to American markets, even just Western ones in general, right? Canada, Europe, places like that. So by getting into a hot war with the US, obviously that would likewise not be maybe something in their best interest. So what makes you think if you just basically start, allowing Chinese oil to be in serious danger through the Persian Gulf even more, now that'll make China suddenly back you? I don't think that's the case. I actually think if Iran does that, then Xi Jinping is only going to try to push harder for you to stop the war in some way, shape, or form. He's going to actually play the diplomatic card there. So, this is all to say, I'm not sure the Iranian strategy here makes a whole lot of sense, but what I do think it likely vindicates is the idea that the Iranian government are not actually rational actors, which maybe proves the people who said they shouldn't have a nuclear weapon correct. Let me explain what I mean by that. For many years, when it comes to a lot of these countries that are, adversaries of the US, whether that's Iran, North Korea, formerly even Iraq, right, places like that, there's sort of two camps. There's one hand that says, oh, they're developing a nuclear weapon, that's bad. There's the other side that says, well, maybe they kind of just want a nuclear weapon for self-defense, right? It's this theory that world governments at the end of the day are self-interested. So North Korea, for example, they're not really building a nuke because they're going to directly launch it at us. It's kind of just a defense mechanism, right? It's that way they keep it safe so the US can't really touch them. And at the end of the day, sure, they may be brutal and have these bad ideas, but they're not going to do something suicidally stupid, right? They want to keep themselves in power. So that's why I say, right, the theory of these countries being allegedly rational actors. Well, I would argue throughout this entire process that the Iranian regime has greatly undermined those arguments of them being rational and kind of self-interested smart at the end of the day. Because it was not rational, it was not smart to start striking the Middle Eastern Gulf states like Saudi Arabia. I mean, we broke that down extensively before, why that was such a strategic blunder. That was a big mistake. You went from looking like you were a country that was just defending yourself and wanted peace to being, oh, we're just like these warmongering crazy maniacs who are just bombing people in a bunch of countries that are not involved. Yeah, what happened? You pissed them off too. You vindicated the argument, by the way, in the international community, or maybe not the whole international community, right? But the international community that matters to the United States, that, hey, actually, like, you're crazy, right? Actually, you're not a rational actor, and what America's doing right now is correct, right? So I would argue that was what they did wrong with Saudi Arabia. And for all the reasons we broke down, I think what they're trying to do right now with the oil tankers, which I don't think ultimately is going to be successful long term. I mean, we'll keep an eye on that, right? But likewise, it's just kind of doubling down on the vindication of the theory, right? That the Iranians are not actually like these self-interested rational actors who are just getting bullied by the United States. Actually, you guys are kind of being the bully. By the way, let me ask the question too. Okay, so, thus far, it'd be one thing if you were seizing oil tankers that went directly to the United States or something like that, or even a NATO country. But let's repeat. These are oil tankers that belong to Thailand and Iraq. What did Thailand and Iraq even have to do with this? What did they do to you? No, you're just these reckless warmongering maniacs who, for many decades now, but especially now you're proving once again, right, cause nothing but problems and instability and issues in the Middle East. And so here we go again, right? Here we go again having to deal with it. So, just kind of my 2 cents on it. Again, I don't think long-term this is going to be smart. I also, again, we'll keep an eye on it, but have to question how long this Iranian problem is going to persist because, well, now they're trying to find new conventional. Okay, so what happens when we blow up the speedboats as well? Obviously, I think in the end, the U.S. Navy will have to patrol the Strait of Hormuz. That is true. But if that happens, then what threat then can you pose to global shipping? I don't know. Are you going to fly on a magic carpet or something? We have no idea here. But anyways, guys, there you have that. Last note I would like to make here is that as it pertains, obviously, to the domestic energy problem, tonight, President Trump announced, indeed, we will be moving ahead on tapping into the strategic oil reserves for the next couple of weeks. Obviously, Joe Biden tried to just do this for several years as a means to make the gas prices look less bad. Trump here is announcing, though, it's likely going to be a short-term basis. Take a listen.
But first, breaking tonight, President Trump says the U.S. will tap into the country's strategic petroleum reserve a little bit, in his words, to ease concerns over rising oil prices. President Trump has just completed remarks to an audience in Hebron, Kentucky.
So look, I mean, certainly this is what strategic oil reserves were actually meant for. They were meant for times of active war, not just because you can't handle an economy and you felt like it, Joe Biden. Okay, they're not meant to be used for several years, by the way, just several months. So that's worth noting. But I would secondly say, I think this is a smart political move for obvious reasons. You want to keep oil prices and gas prices in check, considering this is midterm year. And, that was a success of the Trump administration is low gas prices. And so if it's needed for temporary relief, okay, yeah, that's smart politics. But then lastly, I would like to point out, I think that's also sort of a strategic move against Iran. Because what it basically says is, hey, if you want to mess with oil, hey, we have our own oil, right? Want to see? So, another thing here that I think you got to keep an eye on. But taking a look at the current impact this has had in the past 24 to 48 hours on U.S. oil prices, I'll point out here, they started off the day today at about 86 or so dollars. Now they're at 92.83. That's the WTI U.S. crude oil price. So certainly you saw an increase. Now it's worth noting it was not a super gigantic, dramatic increase, right? Only 6.4% on the day, still below $100 a barrel. So, I guess you could see this as well. It's a little bit of a scare. It's a little bit of a blip in the market, but it's not a huge crisis yet. The question going forward will be, can we neutralize the Iranian threat fast enough and, tap into the reserves if necessary to make sure it stays that way, right? To make sure it doesn't get fully out of control. And then obviously what we want to see is oil prices going down. They slid off a cliff over just on Monday. So now they're rising up a little bit because if they go, tensions are flaring up again. Can we squash that bug as quickly as possible? That is obviously the big challenge that we currently have on our hands. But anyways, guys, there you essentially have it. That said, let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know your thoughts on my assessment of the current oil situation in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.